Hey, how's it going, guys? Welcome back to the African Comic Guy. And today I want to make a case for the director's cut. I really do. And you saw the title. I've become a really huge fan of the director's cut, the real versions of these movies from the director's perspective, right? We've all come, especially in the comics, we've come to understand that these studios tend to interfere, and it might not just be in comics, but studios tend to interfere in movies, right? Like, incredible directors love being able to really have this input, have this incredible control. They like seeing their vision fulfilled in their masterpiece. You know what I mean? And a lot of times what we've come to learn is a lot of studios don't care about that. Studios care about their bottom line. And you can't blame them, but sometimes you can when you see what they give us as opposed to what the director wanted to give us. I mean, case in point, when we saw Batman versus Superman with Zack Snyder, right? I remember when we saw the movie, it was an outstanding movie, did incredibly well. But I remember we all went, there were, certain stories, something was missing. And then we saw the Ultimate Edition. That was his own director's cut. He had extended scenes. And then everything came together. We're like, wait a minute. What? Why the hell did they cut this from the movie? And obviously, oftentimes they say it's the runtime, right? This movie's supposed to be 3.5 hours. We're going to cut it to 2 hours and 15 minutes. Well, there's 40 minutes or 40 or 50 minutes of a movie that was taken out. And that's context from a movie, because when you watch these movies you realize there's so much missing, and then when you watch the director's cut or the extended cut or whatever it is afterwards, right, you're like, wait a minute, this tied into this made sense. I watched this, and this has happened in a ton of movies. The Matrix went through this. I mean, I remember James Cameron talking about he would never really do a movie like Avatar unless he was allowed to really showcase what he wanted to showcase. That's why that movie's 3 hours long. Trust me, the studio would love to cut it to 2 hours and 15 minutes because they believe the runtime is just, no. These two movies made over $1 billion, billions and billions of dollars, because you allowed this man to showcase his vision. Matt Reeves with the Batman that came out a few years ago, he only accepted to do the movie after he told the studio, I needed to go the way I wanted to go. Imagine if, and that movie was so outstanding. Imagine if the studio would have interfered. The studio interfered with Zack Snyder's Justice League. And when we saw his version of Justice League, we were like, wow, it was 4 hours long. But I would have seen that movie in the movie theater, and I would have enjoyed every minute of it.
The only movie I would ever go back and work on is Sucker Punch. That's the only movie that I really think that there would be anything to do, because all of the movies up till now that needed a director's cut got one. And I've been really fortunate and very, I want to say very aggressive in my director's cuts sort of creation, and that's allowed me not to have to go back in a lot of ways. There's 3 cuts of Watchmen, that you can get, but there is a definitive one that I think that's the one, and I think the same thing. Batman versus Superman, obviously, the director's cut is better. Justice League, I feel about that. Obviously, that's better. So it's really, to me, when it's needed, it exists, and I in this case, I almost think that the director's cut of Rebel Moon is an alternative reality version. There's almost like two. It's not an extended cut of this movie. It's almost like a different movie, it's almost a different universe that movie lives in than this movie. So, and the reason for that is because we've gotten it's such a philosophical thing to shoot a director's cut of a movie before you finish this version. Because 99% of all of my director's cut existed as a response to things that were demanded of me to take out of the theatrical version, right? Where that demand was never really made. There was just this anticipation that we knew it would be a PG-13 movie. And I was like, well, in my heart of hearts, I'd always wanted it to be rated R, but you realize the sort of scale and cost of a movie like this, and you're like, okay, well, not 100% responsible to have that be the demand, And so, never. But I'm a good partner in that sense, And so I was like, well, what if, by the way, it was Netflix's idea. They're like, well, but what if there was like, we said, do whatever you want over here, do the PG-13 version, and then just go nuts. We don't care. And that really is a thing I've never experienced before. It's bizarre. That's why it almost split the dimensional rift happened. When that was said out loud, and I think it'll be really a crazy experience for fans because it's just like it's the fully realized like weirdo, heavy metal, bizarro land movie, where, with the PG-13, it can only go so far, and then it has to, there's parameters. This has no parameters, just like, what can you think of, so it's a different experience. But
now you start thinking about what other movies have been interfered with. What other movies have studios interfered with? How about 300? Is there an extended version of 300? How about the scenes that we would love to see of 3? You know what I mean? If there is. Imagine seeing the Lord of the Rings, the original Lord of the Rings, and you're like, how much was cut? How much, you know what I mean? So I do believe that we should have a director's cut. It should be a thing that studios, that TV networks adopt, right? Because a lot of this came from Rebel Moon from Zack Snyder. The first Rebel Moon Part 1 came out last year. It was really, really good. I remember he said it missed an hour. And I was like, an hour? But it was really good. The second part of Rebel Moon came out a few months ago. And it really didn't go well with fans. And then the director's cuts came out, of Part 1 and Part 2. And they were each an hour longer than their original versions. And I remember watching the Rebel Moon Part 1, and I'm like, so much was cut. And then I watched Rebel Moon Part 2, the director's cut, with an hour and some change added onto it. And I was like, this would have worked. This version would have worked if Netflix didn't interfere and say, we don't want the long runtime. You're a streaming network. I'll sit here and watch this. You're a streaming network. I wasn't at the movie theater, but yet you decided we're going to showcase and cut and edit these down to 2 hours and some change, maybe 2:05 or whatever it was. Turns out each movie had an hour's worth of content edited out. And when you watched both director's cut versions, you're like, why the hell did you do this? It makes no sense at all, because if you watched Part 2, the director's cut, it was so much better. It brought so much into that movie. People didn't like Rebel Moon Part 2 because it felt like so many things put together and so fast, and then we saw the director's cut of that version, and we were like, why it didn't make sense. So I am making a case for the director's cut in every movie. I believe that, and they used to do this when we used to rent DVDs, where you'd have like a cut inside, and you'd see certain things, but it wouldn't be added onto the movie. I think that in every movie that we end up loving, that there should be a director's cut. There should be the original one that they showed on in the movie theater or whatever streaming service, and then there should be the director's cut. The director's vision, everything he or she wanted to do in that movie, everything they wanted to showcase and whatever, we should have access to that. Because directors, they're like artists. Imagine going to see a painting and then it goes all the way to a certain point. It's like, I don't understand, why didn't you finish it? Well. No, if it's a masterpiece, allow the director to do it. You already paid the director to make this movie. Let's see exactly what they were trying to show us. So I'm making a case for the director's cut. I don't know how you feel about this. I feel strongly about this. I feel like this should be a thing where we need to see the director's cut. Every movie that's been there, we need to see their versions. What do you see? What if the director edited that movie to their liking? What would be that version? That's what we need to see as a fan base, especially for me in comics. I need to see those versions. Imagine Man of Steel and imagine Zack Snyder saying in Man of Steel, we had 45 minutes cut out of that movie. You're like, huh? Anyway, I'm making a case for the director's cut. I don't know about you, but I believe it should be a thing. We should have access. We should see it. You should allow directors to showcase. Oh, not only that, if we're not going to get it, how about you just allow these directors to showcase what they want to see it? Dude, if you tell us that Superman that's coming out next year, James Gunn, that whatever this movie that he's directing, if you tell us it's going to be 3 hours and 10 minutes, I'm going to sit in that movie theater for 3 hours and 10 minutes. And if that movie's outstanding, I will tell you it's outstanding. I won't care about the time. People watched the Avengers Endgame and Infinity Wars, and these two movies were over 3 hours long. Nobody cared. They would have sat there if it was 4 hours long. Anyway, that's just my 2 cents. I really believe we should have the director's cut of movies. We should have access to that. Or rather, these studios and networks should allow these directors to showcase the movies they want to showcase. Anyway, that's just my 2 cents. Tell me what you think about it. Let's talk about it in the comments. Anyway, like and subscribe. Let's keep growing. Anyway, I'll see you guys on the next episode. Peace.